5 nerfs that made cards stronger, resulting in absurdly powerful gameplay. Up first, we have Order in the Court. Order in the Court, when printed, read, reorder your deck from highest cost to lowest cost, draw a card. This card immediately on release saw play in most Paladin decks, whether it be Control Paladin or even something like a Dude Paladin. In Control Paladin, it was particularly useful to draw things like the Jailer or Light Ray, or just get your Lightforged Curiel off the top of your deck. And it was a good cheap way to reorder your deck, half the cost of something like Lore Keeper Polkelt, but you also get to draw a card when you do it. So for 2 mana, you're cycling, which is already kind of fine, but you're also then selectively drawing specific cards that you can build your deck around. So it's tutored draw for 2 mana. And it doesn't just tutor one draw, it tutors a whole chain of draw. And so in your Control Paladin deck, you are now guaranteed to start top decking your most expensive and most valuable minions, right? Another way to think about it is like Arena, right? Arena, you're top decking your minions at the end of a game, guaranteeing that you can draw your big ones, right? If you put it through that lens, it shows just where the power level of this card lies. And then outside of control decks, in something like Dude Paladin, you're still drawing your most expensive printed cards, but in the sense of like Light Ray, that card could be free when you draw it. It's still going to be at the top of your deck though. So for 2 mana, you're drawing a 0 mana 5/5 with Taunt, and then setting yourself up for your Countess and your big late game. Whereas your deck mostly was early game spamming dudes, doing really powerful aggro things, and now this guarantees your little bit of mid-range late game threats are going to be drawn at the time that you need them. This card was just an immediate staple in all the Paladin decks in the format, so eventually they had to nerf it. They nerfed it to no longer draw a card, right? It's still doing the thing where you get to know what's coming next, but you don't get to do it as early, so it slows down across the board Paladin as a whole. Except for one deck. But before I can tell you about that crazy story, let me tell you about today's sponsor, World of Warships. More specifically, their brand new strategy-based card event. The new Dunkirk 1940 event challenges players to command ships and civilian vessels to rescue trapped Allied troops. Whether you're a fan of naval history or just want to experience new card mechanics, you can relive these historic moments while engaging in tactical gameplay, using ship-themed cards to overcome obstacles, such as drifting mines, enemy aircraft, and fog. In both key and supply missions, you use these cards to apply expendable modifiers for tactical advantages. The missions are deterministic, so if you can match your ship's strengths using critical thinking and a bit of risk taking, you will win. New players using my code get 7 days of premium account time, 1 million free credits, as well as 500 doubloons. What a fun word to say that is. A tier 7 ship and an Operation Dynamo container. The game is free to play on PC, and you can get into the action through the link in the description. Honor history and prove you are a real gamer in this unique World of Warships event. Now let's get back to our crazy story. You see, there's this Paladin card that I'm sure many of you have heard of called Holy Wrath. 5 mana holy spell, draw a card and deal damage equal to its cost. This is one of those rare situations where you'd prefer Order in the Court to not have the draw a card line of text. What this allows you to do now is to play Order in the Court, putting your big expensive minions like Molten Giant or Shirvala, or more recently added to the game, Ceaseless Expanse. That has a lot of mana crystals on it. And so when you play Order in the Court and then follow it up with Holy Wrath, you draw your most expensive card. With the Holy Wrath, dealing that amount of damage to your opponent's face. So instead of playing Order in the Court, drawing your Ceaseless Expanse, and then Holy Wrathing for 20 or whatever, you are now Order in the Courting, playing Holy Wrath, and dealing 100 or 125 or whatever amount of damage Ceaseless Expanse costed at the time, because that card was also nerfed. But that doesn't matter because all of those numbers, 100 and up or like anywhere close to that, is 3 times more damage than you actually need. So suddenly, you've got a deck where you just discount the cost of your Holy Wrath with something like the Cowboy card, or really anything. You Order in the Court, and then you Holy Wrath, like turn 4 or turn 5 for 100+ damage, and you just win the game instantly. This was such a problem that in order to fix this from being oppressive, they changed Order in the Court. This time, changing the card to say, reorder your deck from highest cost to lowest cost, draw a card. They gave you a full dust refund for this card, which is hilarious because they're just buffing the card or reverting it to its original state. The dev comment says, on its face, this looks like a buff, which technically it is, and technically the original was a nerf. But the intent of this change is to pull back on a play pattern that is warping the wild metagame. With the introduction of the Ceaseless Expanse, the deck got a payoff worth going all in on a way that made the deck faster and more consistent than ever before. This change will still allow for big plays, while skipping over the turn 5 100 damage Holy Wrath target. And then with the change, they unbanned the Ceaseless Expanse, which they had to ban temporarily as a band-aid solution to this problem. It's so funny that they nerf a card, which ends up buffing a deck so severely that they have to ban a card in the meantime and then rebuff the card to nerf the deck. What a perfect example of a card being nerfed and then becoming stronger. That is the story of our first nerf that made a card stronger in Order in the Court. Up next is Thrall's Gift. This is a rather simple one where the card was changed for one deck, and then that one deck was weaker as a result of this card being changed, but every other deck in the class was stronger as a result of this card being changed. And so as a result, this card was seeing a lot more play and was overall better. If you don't know, Thrall's Gift is a card that lets you discover originally a temporary Lightning Bolt, Hex, or Bloodlust. The card was changed to discover a temporary Lightning Storm instead of Lightning Bolt, and then still Hex or Bloodlust. This is a line of cards from the super unique and cool holiday gift set that they did, the 10-year anniversary. Every class got one of these that lets you discover 3 kind of classic cards in the form of a present, I guess, that you opened. The story here is fairly simple. Nature Shaman, a deck revolving around bioluminescence and other nature spells such as Lightning Bolt, dealing damage, with the bioluminescent being reduced to be cheaper, and then just kind of spamming a bunch of spell damage and then a bunch of damage to the opponent's face. So Thrall's Gift was essentially in that deck just 2 more Lightning Bolts that costed a little bit more mana, and that was it. So by changing Lightning Bolt to Lightning Storm, this overly fast, overly damaging Nature Shaman combo deck is slowed down and has damage removed from it. However, now Control Shaman, Midrange Shaman, any other archetype of Shaman now has access to a Lightning Storm. So any version of Cards Shaman that you want to play, you suddenly have access to a card that can be single target removal, AoE removal, or a surprise finisher if a couple of your random minions just stick. So this went from being like kind of only used as a 3rd and 4th Lightning Bolt to being just a generally useful card in many, many decks. Simple and sweet. Thrall's Gift, nerfed specifically for Nature Shaman, but then sort of just changed instead of nerfed and made stronger for everything else. Up next, we have Kael'thas Sunstrider, a legendary neutral minion from the Ashes of Outland set that read on release, every 3rd spell you cast each turn costs 0. The way that this was most commonly or most effectively abused on release was in Demon Hunter. The way it would work is Demon Hunter would use 0 mana Twin Slice that gave your hero 1 attack and another copy of that card. You would then play the second copy of that card, a second 0 mana spell with your Kael'thas to then make your next spell, which would often be Inner Demon, free. That was for 6 mana, 10 attack to your hero. You could then repeat that with 2 more Twin Slices, which is just 1 card, but it's 2 0 mana spells, another Inner Demon, and you have 20 attack given to your hero. Combine that with things like Metamorphosis and weapons and just general Demon Hunter, you were pretty likely that that would be enough damage to kill your opponent. There were other ways that you could use Kael'thas to make free Yogg boxes or just randomly whatever you can think of off the top of your head expensive spells, and it was just very powerful, whether it was being used deliberately to kind of OTK or finish your opponent, or just to get a lot of value and cheat a lot of mana. Because of those things, primarily Demon Hunter and some Mage, the card had to be nerfed, right? It was just too good to be able to cheat out that much mana, to be able to make things cost 0, that normally would cost 8, right? Or 10. So you changed the card a month after it came out to go from 6 mana to 7 mana. Just a nerf, right? We can all agree that is a nerf. The card has been nerfed. But what ended up happening is that as a result of this card being nerfed, it was suddenly tutorable by Psych Melon, which is a 4 mana spell that draws a 7, 8, 9, and 10 cost card. Suddenly, 7 mana Kael'thas is now a card you can tutor as Malygos Druid, which immediately upon nerf and discovery brought Malygos Druid to tier S to the likes that you don't often see. I suppose in wild standards we should be a little bit more careful with calling something tier S, because things can be like tier triple S in that mode at this point, like that things can just just be absurd. So we could just agree it was tier 1, but it was extremely good. Much better than it was doing at 6 mana anywhere. The way it would work is you'd play Psych Melon, draw your 7, 8, 9, 10 cost cards, play all of these cards for really basically essentially free with something like Geppetto or Aviana, and then you would use Malygos and a bunch of spells, some of which cost mana and some of which are free thanks to the Kael'thas, to kill your opponent from basically any life total that they could possibly have, and also killing their entire board in the process. So if you somehow didn't have enough damage, your swipes and stuff at least killed their entire minion, you have a massive board now, and you're gonna win the game. But most of the time, almost always, you just were straight up killing them. This is a card that, you know, it was in standard still, so all they did at first was they were like, okay, we'll make it cost 7. That'll slow down the demon hunters using inner demon and the mages using big mage spells. But what ended up happening is it ended up being bonkers now because it was tutorable by Psych Melon. And so partially due to that, partially due to it still being pretty good in standard, 4 months later, they changed it again to saying every third spell you cost each turn costs 1. But anyway, that is the story of Kael'thas Sunstrider going from 6 to 7 mana and then accidentally becoming even stronger due to Psych Melon Malygos Druid. And that is where the story should have ended, and for our case it really does end. But when it rotated to Wild, they decided to revert that nerf and make it say cost 0 again, which created a turn 1 OTK in Wild, which is just hilarious. And that was like a 2-week fiesta of just the most broken thing you could imagine. Before we get to our 5th and final card, we have our, well, 4th card, Mystery Egg. This card is a little bit different than the rest, and it's actually a follow-up to a story I delivered in a previous video about bad cards breaking Hearthstone, where Princess Huhuran was breaking the game by being cheated out by Mystery Egg and being able to be free, and that was the first time that card had seen any play ever. So if you haven't seen that story, you can watch that video for it. This card was a problem, like I said, because it created Princess Huhuran and also the Mock Nathal Lion. Both of those would be cheated out and would be free, and you'd be able to just kind of repeat that, because if you target the egg with a Princess Huhuran and get another, you just keep going. And if you use the lion for free, put it on the egg, attack it into something, you get another egg, you can get another lion, and so you can essentially just clear their entire board, no matter how big it is, by just playing 0 mana 5/2 lions with Rush over and over again. Or you can fill your board with 6/5 beasts just over and over again in many, many waves, because even if they kill the egg, you then have the miniature version and a second egg with a second miniature version, and so you just kind of have an endless stream of beasts, right? We've been over this before. So what they did to fix that, and at the conclusion of that video, I kind of talked about how like they're adjusting this, they're fixing it, they're removing this interaction, so Princess Huhuran was never going to see the light of the day again. And that turned out to be true, because what they did to the card to nerf the wild interaction was actually to buff the card for standard. So this is a little bit different than our past cards, because unlike the card being nerfed to be made stronger, they attempted to buff the card for standard in a way that would nerf it for wild, because it would remove the Princess Huhuran interaction. So what they did is they made it cost 4 mana instead of 5, but they made the text on the card only reduce by 4 instead of 5. So you could no longer use Rhino or Huhuran as options. You could only use things like the lion or anything cheaper. And this, everyone thought in the wild community, would be a nerf because you no longer had the same options. You could only use the lion. Turns out though, much like the rest of the cards in this video, this card didn't just get stronger for standard, it also got stronger for wild. Turns out you don't actually need Princess Huhuran or Rhino or really care much about the beasts at all. You can just use things like Feign Death and Lion with the Mystery Egg to make a bunch of 0 mana lions, and then with Bran, you can use the lions instead of on Mystery Egg on Naval Mine. No one had thought to just ignore the beast synergies and just make this an OTK deck. Suddenly, you're doubling up the battle cry so that each lion that dies deals 8, or each time you activate the death rattle with another Feign Death, for example, you deal 8. And suddenly, instead of just making a bunch of beasts and whittling them down that way, you just make a bunch of death rattles that deal damage and then Feign Death, and then just OTK your opponent on like turn 5, 6, or 7, or 8, right? Who would have thought that by forcing us to not do what we were doing as one of the best decks in the game, we would actually just find a better deck in the game? Because now, you know, we can't use the Huron and stuff, but the card's cheaper. So we can get to the point where we're doing the Naval Mine version of the deck and just OTKing our opponents sooner. So the card is just better for everyone. The plan of hoping it would, you know, help out standard and wild backfired tremendously, as it just was even better in wild. Again, there's probably some people, if I haven't continuously reminded you in this section, I know that this was just technically a buff, so it's different from the rest of the cards in this video, but the story and the kind of point that we're going for, the theme, is the exact same. The card was changed in a way that they were attempting to address a problem, and they ended up just making an entirely entirely different, bigger problem, which is exactly what we're talking about. And so because of that, they were like, okay, that didn't work so well. We'll now make it a 4-mana egg, but we're gonna make the death rattle 3 or less. And that is why you have not seen this card or this deck in a very long while. Our 5th and final nerf that made cards stronger is Thaddeus Monstrosity. Thaddeus released as a 10-mana taunt minion with 11 attack and 11 health. That read, your odd cost cards cost 1, swaps polarity each turn. This is a classic case, much like Kel'Thas, of just cheating out really expensive cards and playing them for 1. So, a way that you could do this entirely with neutral cards on release was you'd cheat out Thaddeus, and then your Bran Bronzebeard, your Zola the Gorgon, and your new Alexstrasza from the core set were all 1 mana. So you could play Bran, play Alexstrasza dealing 16 to the face, play Zola to get more of them, and then play a whole bunch more of them to the opponent's face. And that was only like 5 mana worth of cards because all these cards cost 1. And you're obviously cheating out Thaddeus in some way that saves you mana. You're not just playing it for 10. And so this created an instant OTK that was available to you in every single class. People used it in Paladin with things like Bone Lord Frost Whisperer, which would make your first card of your turn cost 0, but would make it so you died in 3 turns. That didn't really matter though if the first card you're making cost 0 was Thaddeus, and then suddenly you could play your Bran, Zola, and Alexstrasza as we talked about. You could also use things like the weapon that Paladin has, where you can cheat out your biggest minion from hand. So you've got this OTK available to you in every class. Of course, you're going to figure out the few classes it's best in, and you're just going to abuse it while you can, right? Whether it's just a card you generate and make a bunch of like WoW Hobbs had a good time doing, or you use an OTK like Clark did and many other people, the card is a problem, right? It's cheating out just an absurd amount of mana. So they nerfed it. What it says now, after the nerf, 6 months later, after it came out, it read, your odd cost cards cost 4 less. So instead of costing 1, they just cost 4 less, right? So your Alexstrasza, instead of costing 1, now costs 5. Big nerf. However, this card now no longer has the text that says, but not less than 1. You see, before, your odd cost cards cost 1 also means your odd cost cards cost 1, but not less than 1. Now, your odd cost cards cost 4 less and totally could cost 0. So now, in something like Sludge Warlock, you use Amorphous Slime to cheat out your biggest undead, which is Thaddeus, and then all of your odd cost cards, like Zola, like Silver Moon Arcanist, like Sludge on Wheels, or just Barrel of Sludge in general, now costs nothing. So suddenly, on turn 5 or 6, you're playing every card in your entire deck, because you're just going to run 1 and 3 mana cards, for free, and you are killing your opponent with spell damage and damage spells. So instead of on like turn 6 or 7 or 8 if you're lucky with Bone Lord and Thaddeus, you're now just doing it earlier in a more consistent draw heavy class of Warlock and just a better package. So you're just better off than you were before. You don't need your cards to cost 1 and cheat out expensive cards if you can cheat out your odd 3 and 1 mana cards and have them cost 0. You were limited by the amount of mana and like the amount of things that you could actually cheat out with a high enough effect at 1 mana that you'd much rather just cheat out every card under the sun and play them all for 0. What a classic case of the version changing, the card version changing, the deck version changing, and it's stronger now in every way than it was before. You can technically cheat out less mana, but now cards just cost 0. So you're just OTKing your opponent earlier than you were before. You have to play a whole lot more cards to do it, but you can certainly do it in time. This is no race against the clock here. Absolutely pinnacle case of a nerf that made a card stronger. Don't forget, you can use the link in the description to hop into World of Warships today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.